People see me and think they're safer. But it's not really me they're seeing. Probably for the best. Knowing everything hinges on a guy from Queens sounds as scary as it feels. No pressure, right?
Hey guys, whoever's on the screen, let me know. Yeah, hashtag Spider-Man. Glad to see you guys can make it. Whoever's on the stream. Just gonna be monitoring my stream as well. Let's see, display capture. Just want to make sure everything's here. Videos and display capture whole web page. Okay, so that's done. Yeah, I'm just monitoring it in my OBS, guys. Excuse me for a second, just checking. All right, so hi everybody. If you're here, please say hello in the chat. I hope you all are having a wonderful night. I know it's a little late, but you know, I promised that I'd be reading the next 3 chapters of Spider-Man Hostile Takeover. It's not much of a read anyways, actually. It's only chapters 4 through 6. Not many pages, but nonetheless, still fun. But anyways, guys, if you're ready to get started, let's get started right away. And we'll do the stream. Alright, without further ado, you've entered the reading zone with Mr. Astonish. I'm your host, Ronnie. Alright, Alvin Ayo, how's it going, man? Hope you're having a good night. Alright, so if we're all ready, let's go ahead and get started with the chat, with the read. So, Chapter 4, Spider-Man Hostile Takeover. She was a slender woman in her 30s, wearing jeans, leather jacket, and a yellow button-down shirt. She looked like she meant business, though she didn't seem terribly eager to shoot him. "What are you doing here?" she demanded of him. "I didn't kill him," he answered. As soon as he did, it sounded lame. Now, if you all recall from the last read, Spider-Man was accused of a murder, and he was placed at the scene from this woman that accused him. So if you all don't remember, or if you weren't here in the last stream, that's what happened. I know that she snapped. "Unless you figured out how to hide a pistol in that skin-tight suit of yours, it'd stick out like a tumor." "Thanks," he offered. "Don't be funny. Tell me what you know. Any chance you could put that gun down?" The woman glared at him, then sighed. "I don't suppose it would do much against you anyhow." She holstered her weapon. "You just grab it with those rope thingies of yours. They're actually webs," Spider-Man said. "Powered by science. Anyhow, let's do this the polite way. I'm Spider-Man and you are Lieutenant Yuri Watanabe." So Yuri Watanabe meets Spider-Man in the prequel novel, and that's how he knows Yuri in the video game. So now we're introduced to Yuri Watanabe in chapter 4. So it's pretty awesome, she said in a clipped voice. "And I'm not looking for a new pal." All right. Hey, if you just joined, please leave a message in the chat. Okay, you're a person of interest in a murder investigation, And while bringing you to the precinct for questioning would present some challenges, putting out an APB on you would probably mess up your week. So how about you stop wasting my time? No nonsense, tough as nails, and wanting to work with Spider-Man. He liked that, and it made him think. For years, he'd wondered how much more he could get done if he had a direct relationship with the police department. His mind raced with the possibilities. The trick would be to prove his worth to her. That would involve much lower percentage of wisecracks per sentence than what came naturally, but he was pretty sure. If he focused, he can get it done. Tell me how I can help, he said. Why did your voice suddenly get so deep? It didn't. It did, and it still is. Before you sounded like a kid. Hey! And now you sound like a kid trying to fool someone over the phone. How about less criticism and more crime solving, he proposed. A wry little smile flickered across Lieutenant Watanabe's lips. Then she was back to business. You see that trailer down there? She pointed to a white metal rectangle about 200 feet past where the other plainclothes cop was still sipping his coffee. He was also looking at his phone, and from the distance, Peter couldn't be sure, but it looked like he was playing some kind of jewel matching game. Kind of sounds like Candy Crush or something. And I think it's raining outside, by the way, because where I am, it rains a lot down here. That's the terminal security office, she said. The door is on the far side, so if you can meet me there without anyone seeing you, I'd like to show you something. Give me 5 minutes. Then she was gone. Getting to the entrance was no problem. A little creative swing and he was through the door. Lieutenant Watanabe was seated at a desk, running her fingers along a keyboard. It was gloomy, but a half-dozen video monitors illuminated her face, each showing a different section of the facility. The trailer smelled of old gym clothes. Watanabe turned the moment he entered, and her stand moved toward her gun, not quite touching it. She might be willing to work with him. She might even trust him on principle, but she wasn't about to let her guard down. Peter didn't like her any less for it. It was a common sense. I told everyone I needed to concentrate in here, so we have a few minutes. She began without any preamble. But we don't have all the time in the world, so save your comments and questions for the end. Her fingers danced across the keyboard. One of the monitors went dark and then began playing a recording. The first thing she showed him was a black and white clip revealing the first encounter with Andy. A time signature spun rapidly in the lower left corner. It was always weird watching footage of himself. There was a part of his mind that never quite got used to seeing himself from the outside. When I left, he was fine, Spider-Man said. The footage backed him up. Quiet, she said, forwarding the footage for what looked like only a few minutes. It showed Andy walking away from the dock, trying to keep to the shadows, probably mindful of the security cameras. Then Spider-Man leaped in behind him, landing lightly on his feet, so lightly that Andy seemed not to notice. Definitely not how things happened. He knew that move, knew how to land from 30 or 40 feet up without making a noise. He did it all the time to get a drop on bad guys. It had taken him months to learn the trick back when he first started out. Now it was second nature. The problem was, that wasn't him. Was it? The moves were right, so much so he had to remind himself that it was impossible. He looked at the time signature. By that point, he was well on his way to the construction site. Yo, Chris Critic, what's up, man? I'm glad you can join. You definitely didn't miss the stream this time. And for the rest of you guys that are joining, or if you're new, I'd appreciate it if you like and subscribe. Also, you can donate now. I have a donation link down in the description box below. So if you want to go ahead and donate, you can do that. I don't have Super Chat. That's only when I reach 1,000 subscribers. But you can actually donate and send money to my PayPal if you like. I just got to enable it. Give me one moment. Donations. You can actually donate here. This will be a link. It's in the chat. It's in the description box, by the way. So if you want to donate, you can. I'm gonna go ahead and edit it in the description box. If you want, you can actually refresh this live feed right now, and then you'll see the description box. It'll say donation, streamlabs.com/news to astonish. That's where you can go to donate. Well, I mean, there's plenty of anime to binge. So you can go ahead and check that out if you want. Oh, man. Chris, if you want to do Cowboy Bebop, you need to do Cowboy Bebop. That is an amazing anime. I have it on Blu-ray, and it's beautiful. So where was I? Holy crap, it has to be the guy. The imposter. He was about to open his mouth to say something when the Spider-Man imposter raised his right hand. He held a gun. It looked absurd and strange and grotesque. Spider-Man never touched the gun, unless it was to get it away from some idiot who had one. Even then, he usually used his webs. Guns were big and loud and nasty. They were difficult to nuance and frequently deadly. They were everything he didn't want to be. The imposter must have said something, because Andy jumped, his shoulders lurching upward and his legs wobbling in mid-stride. He turned and then started to backpedal. There was the burst of the muzzle flash, a violent eruption of light that obscured everything else in the dark frame. When the light cleared, Andy lay on the ground. The imposter took a moment to examine the body. Then he fired 3 more shots into the prone figure. He paused for another instant and then shifted his gaze to look at the security camera. At least it seemed like he did. It was hard to tell with the mask. He then raised his left hand, a web shot out, and he propelled himself out of the camera's field of view. So this guy, whoever this imposter is, not only had a gun, which is very uncharacteristic of Spider-Man, but he shot out a web too. So he's able to mimic his moves, but then again, act like not like Spider-Man. So Spider-Man needed time to gather his thoughts. There were 100 things he wanted to say, and he didn't even know yet what half of them might be. Ideas burst into his mind, only to be replaced by others. Outrage, pity, indignation. Raw emotions had the advantage here, but there were other things, observations of minor details that some distant, calmer part of his mind knew might be of use to the detective. You think this could be the works of Mysterio? It was hard to stick to the logic, though Andy had died facing an impersonator. He died believing that Spider-Man had gunned him down. It didn't make the crime any worse, but it made him all the more determined to do something about it. I didn't do that, he said. I would never do anything like that. It's inconsistent with your past behavior, Watanabe replied in a clinical tone, and it would be hard to prove that one person wearing a mask is the same as another person wearing the same mask. The perp moves a whole lot like you do, though, and that's harder to mimic. If you have an alibi, it would help us. Maybe there's another place you might be on camera at the same time. Though, again, we still have the mask and identity problem. First of all, that's not me. His thoughts began to shift into focus, at least some of them. I don't use guns, and I actually don't go around assassinating people. Even the Daily Bugle, back when Jameson was calling for my head, never claimed I would do that. I believe you, Watanabe said, replaying the footage, but my opinion doesn't count as evidence. Spider-Man leaned in closer to the screen, peering at the costume figure who appeared there. Freeze it, he said. There. The suit isn't quite right. It's close. It's a decent copy. Definitely better than something you'd get from a costume shop. But the design is a little off. I can't say anything about the color, but the spider icon doesn't look exactly like mine. And the web lines are too close together. Oh, Carlos Arabia, thank you for joining the stream. Hey, I got good news. The Pope confirmed that good doggos go to heaven. Well, you know what? All doggos must go to heaven. I love doggos. Doggos and puppers go to heaven. And, you know, may they rest in peace for all those doggos that died. And may they chew on all the infinite amount of chew toys and biscuits that's up there in doggo heaven. Anyways, thanks for that, Carlos Arabia. Anyways, I noticed that too, Lieutenant Watanabe said. We're at the part, Carlos, if you're joining, thank you for joining. We're at the part where we're introduced with to Yuri Watanabe, so who's like the police officer that Spider-Man collaborates with in the video game. Apparently, you know, they meet here in this book, so it's pretty exciting stuff. Here, look at the earlier footage. She brought it up on another screen. You would have had to change your outfit into something nearly identical and then come right back. It doesn't make sense, but whenever we're dealing with costume vigilantes, making sense doesn't always apply. She let her voice trail off in a way that indicated she was playing devil's advocate and not actually arguing a position she believed. Spider-Man took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. He needed to tell her everything that had happened and then had to figure out what would be most useful. She pulled out her cell phone and he began describing his encounter with Andy, getting the tip about the construction site. He went through everything that happened there as well. It sounds awfully convenient, she said tonelessly as she typed. A guy who can copy your moves just happens to show up, and the same night Spider-Man is filmed killing a kid. She shook her head. Like I said, things with your crowd don't always make sense, but this feels like a setup. The disposable henchmen were there to slow you down while the real bad guy changed his clothes and hightailed it over there to face you. It sounded plausible, but there were still a lot of unanswered questions. Why change his clothes at all? Maybe because he wanted you to see this, she said with a shrug. Probably figured you'd catch it on the news rather than here with a cop. But I think the shooter wanted this video to be a gut punch. Someone is calling you out. I'd ask if you have any enemies, but that's a stupid question. If the construction site has video cameras, and most of them do, then it will at least prove that part of my story. I'm thinking the same thing, she said. You got an address? He told her about the building, and Lieutenant Watanabe's eyes went wide. She set down her phone and turned to look at him. Are you kidding me? You sure that's the location? Yeah, he said. Why? She let out a long breath that hissed between clenched teeth. It's hidden behind hundreds of pages of documents and a half-dozen shell companies, but that construction site is owned by Wilson Fisk. She worked her mouth as if she was trying to get rid of the bad taste. The freaking kingpin of crime. Ooh, now we're getting somewhere. Guys, thank you for joining the stream. I appreciate it. Just to update you guys that just joined, thank you so much for joining. Just updating you, we are continuing with Spider-Man Hostile Takeover. I am in Chapter 4. We just got introduced to Yuri Watanabe, who is the cop that's going to be working with Spider-Man. Basically, Yuri Watanabe is Jim Gordon to Batman, basically. And Yuri Watanabe just has a video of catching Spider-Man supposedly killing a kid, but he didn't kill the kid, obviously, because Spider-Man doesn't wield a gun. But I'm just trying to catch you up for those of you who are joining. Thanks once again, and don't forget that you can donate in the description box below. There's a link. Anyways, back to where we were. And now we're on Chapter 5. So these chapters are going by kind of quick. Anyways, you guys want to say anything on the chat? How's it going? Talk to me about your day. You guys all excited about Spider-Man PS4? Fisk, he thought. The anger blossomed inside him, radiating outward until it was hard to remain still. Fisk was in the news a lot. Back when he'd first started Spider-Manning, Peter had been convinced Fisk was, as the tabloids claimed, the kingpin of crime. The most ruthless criminal in the city. Sure, Peter was just a high school kid back then, but he'd been driven to prove that he could use his powers responsibly. I gotta sneeze. Oh. Excuse me. Did my stream freeze? Nah. No money for it until the end of the month. That sucks. Excuse me. JJ's the best Spider-Man villain? JJ is the best Spider-Man villain. What do you mean JJ? Hang on, my Google Chrome is acting like stupid. JJ isn't really a Spider-Man villain. You mean J. Jonah Jameson, the JJ, or JJJ? Ugh. Sorry, the stream wasn't going too well. Well, the stream's going fine, actually. My Google Chrome froze. Excuse me. J. Jonah Jameson. I mean, he's not... Carlos, he's not really a villain. I mean, he was partially responsible for, like, the Spider Slayers, but that's pretty much it. But he's not really a villain. Anyways, Fisk was in the blah, 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 blah. Okay. He'd made a massive mistake soon after he got his spider powers. A frivolous decision not to act when he might have acted, should have acted, and that had led to the death of his Uncle Ben. He'd sworn never again to sit idly when there was something he could do, something that would make a difference. That something had been putting Kingpin behind bars. Spider-Man had dedicated months of his life toward the one goal, disrupting Fisk's operations, keeping him off his game, and looking for hard evidence upon which even a bribed or blackmailed district attorney would have to act. Spider-Man had dug up that proof. He collected files, laptops, photographs, and witnesses. He'd found enough hard evidence to put Fisk in a bespoke orange jumpsuit for life. But then, it felt like the triumph of a lifetime. He remembered sitting on the couch with Aunt May, shoving fists full of popcorn into his mouth while the local news showed Fisk perp walking into the precinct. You know, Peter, there was a time when I wasn't sure how to feel about that Spider-Man, Aunt May had told him, but it certainly looks like as if he's done the city a real favor. Coming from her, it had felt really good. That cocktail of pride and satisfaction and contentment, the sensation of knowing he'd really accomplished something important, had been hard to beat. Then life beat it. Life beat it right down and smacked it upside down in its metaphorical head. Fisk's lawyers went to work, and suddenly half the news outlets in the city were on Fisk's side. It was a setup, they said. Spider-Man was a thug and a criminal himself, and he wanted honest businessmen like Wilson Fisk destroyed to the criminals, so the criminals could have free reign. Evidence went missing. Documents vanished or changed. Photos were alerted. Oh, wow. And computer records disappeared. Of course, with a person like Fisk, he's really powerful. He can make those things disappear. Witness forgot things or remembered entirely. Forgot in quotation marks. Forgot things. Or remembered entirely. New accounts that exonerated Fisk made him look innocent. Made him look like a hero struggling to save his business while a lawless vandal in a costume tried to tear down everything an honest man had accomplished. Fisk walked. He'd gone right out of the courthouse and then out of the country. He had been gone for years, too. And maybe that was good enough. Spider-Man had told himself. Sure, it wasn't perfect. No one wanted a guy like Fisk being evil on someone else's turf. But at least Spider-Man had cleaned up his own backyard. If people everywhere did the same, the bad guys would have nowhere to hide. It was weak, Spider-Man knew, but it was all he had. Then a year ago, Fisk appeared back on the scene, throwing money around, investing in prominent real estate deals, developing long neglected parts of the city, creating jobs and goodwill. The newspapers were full of stories about Fisk Foundation and a new charitable effort which was aimed at promoting opportunities for New Yorkers of all incomes. Wilson Fisk was a changed man. He told anyone who would listen, which included a number of journalists whose organizations were flush with Fisk money. He'd never been what the vigilantes had claimed, he told them, but he had been selfish and greedy, focused on nothing but his own bottom line. Hardship had taught him the price of selfishness. Now he understood that he had to do good to do well, and that was why every project he invested in would make the city a little better, improve the lives of its citizens. He didn't want to profit unless others profited too. That was what he claimed, and that was what plenty of people seemed to believe. The truth was, Fisk was back in drugs and extortion and hijacking and money laundering. All of his old tricks. If it was dirty and violent and profitable, he had his hands in it. Spider-Man knew it, and he was sure he could prove it, but he didn't know if proving it would change a thing. It hasn't last time. I know you've got your own history with that piece of garbage, Watanabe said. That's one of the reasons I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt. I've been trying to build a case against Fisk since he came back on the scene, but I've had to do it on the sly. There are plenty of people above me who don't want Fisk investigated. Fisk always had cops on his payroll. Allegedly, Watanabe said, but her tone made it clear there was no doubt. Those charges were dropped. Remember, you played a pretty big part in his arrest that time. What was that, 5 years ago? 7, Spider-Man said. Right, she said. I guess the question is, what is Fisk after now? Why go to all this trouble? What does setting you up get him? Seems like it's better to focus on catching this impersonator, Spider-Man proposed. Fisk is slippery, and we can worry about his motives later. This bogus Spider-Man, bogus me, might provide all of the news, all of the answers. Can you ask for the video camera feed from the construction site? We can ask, she said, but if they say no, we'll need a search warrant and without any evidence of a crime. But your word, I don't see that happening. Even if we could get a warrant, it'll take time. Fisk might have his people erase or alter the feed by then. Why would Fisk even have a secret construction site? Spider-Man asked. Everyone knows he's a real estate developer. This building is nothing but high-end luxury co-ops, Watanabe explained. There's nothing noble about it, nothing that benefits the common man. It's meant to make a ton of money, so he doesn't want it getting out, since it's not consistent with his new good guy con. None of this tells us what he wants. It looks like good old-fashioned revenge to me, Watanabe said. You messed with him. Now he's messing with you. You really put the hurt on him back in the day. You gathered a ton of good evidence, but Fisk's lawyers were able to kick up plenty of reasonable doubt, especially with evidence gathered by a guy dressed like a spider. There's no point in going after him again. I didn't say that, she replied. If you'd had someone on the inside helping you out, someone who could clean the evidence the way Fisk launders money, things might have turned out differently the first time. I know you cost you times are loners, but maybe we could help each other out. This was what he had been waiting to hear. It was a terrific idea, but he didn't want to appear too anxious, so he leaned back and folded his arms. Maybe. He just went, maybe. Alright, guys. Anything you'd like to add? Please don't forget to comment in the chat log. I'm usually out of Chinatown, but Hell's Kitchen is shorthanded tonight, she said. That clown out there playing some stupid game on his phone isn't my regular partner either. She gestured with her head, looking disgusted. In fact, I think he could just be one of those guys in Fisk's pocket, which is why I'm happy to let him play games on his phone instead of helping me out. I caught this case, and that moron will be happy to be off the hook. All of which means I call the shots. I'm going to go off on the offensive, argue that we suppress the Spider-Man angle, say the evidence makes it clear, and it does, that this is an imposter looking to stir the pot, and we don't want to play his game. Sooner or later, the guy will have to strike again, and someone else gets killed. Maybe, maybe not, she shrugged. There's no reason to think that he'll play the same hand twice. There's also no reason to think he won't use violence again, no matter what we do. Our best option is to keep him playing our game, rather than having us play his. Meanwhile, you and me, we go after Fisk. Go after him now? I don't know, she admitted. I need to give this some thought, but you can go places I can't, and I know things that you don't. Your ability should be able to land us evidence I'd never get my hands on otherwise, and I can turn it into something that will hold up in a court. She paused, then added, let me chew on this a little while. If you don't like what I come up with, you can tell me to get lost, but I have a feeling you'd like to see Fisk go down as much as I would. She held out her hand. They shook, and maybe it was just the emotion of that moment, but it felt as if something momentous had just happened. Let's just hope we don't make things worse, he said. Watanabe grinned. I can see you're going to be a whole lot of fun to work with. It was 7 o'clock. It wasn't 7 o'clock yet. It felt much later, like the sun should be coming up soon. Peter still hadn't processed everything that had happened. The setup, Andy being murdered, the imposter, and Fisk. It was a bubbling stew of horribleness. The only bright spot was Lieutenant Watanabe. If she was willing to work with him and to figure out how they could pool their resources, it might be a chance to set things right. Inside his East Village apartment, Peter navigated the piles of clothes, dirty dishes, stacks of books, and tortuously assembled computer components. The place was cramped, badly maintained, and way too expensive. He was behind with last month's rent and couldn't even bring himself to think about this month's. Living in a shoebox he couldn't afford was just part of the glamour of being a superhero. While he pulled off his suit, he tried to focus his anger in the right direction. Fisk was famous for counterpunching. Hey, if you're just joining the stream, welcome. I just want to welcome you guys with open arms, I guess. Reading Spider-Man Hostile Takeover. Just hyping up the game and all, guys. So I'm reading the next 3 chapters. We're going to read till chapter 6 tonight, and that'll be it. And then we can chat a little bit if you like, if there's plenty of you guys that still want to chat. So it didn't surprise Peter that even after all these years, he'd be looking to get back as Spider-Man. Fisk didn't know how to hurt the man, so he figured he could hurt the image. Peter couldn't worry about reputation, though. He had to focus on doing what he could to help as many people as possible. Uncle Ben had said it himself. With great power, there must also come great responsibility. In the comics, actually, Stan Lee said it, but whatever. It was something Peter hadn't considered the night he decided not to stop a thief. The thief who later killed his uncle. They were the words Peter tried to live by now. He had a responsibility to use his abilities the best way he could. He also had a habit of examining everything he did, picking over every move, every decision to see if he could have done better. Were there better choices he might have made tonight, choices that might have saved Andy's life? Peter thought he'd done what seemed to be right thing at the time, not knowing that he'd been set down onto the board of a bigger game. If Fisk was involved, though, he couldn't afford to let his guard down, or not again. Fisk was as corrupt as they came, and Peter couldn't change that. He could, however, stop him, and that meant doing everything in his power to make it happen. First things first, though. What he needed more than anything else was to see MJ. She always talked him down and helped him feel better. She wasn't answering her phone again, though, so he figured he should go out and look for her. Turning on the shower, he took a cautionary sniff at his suit. There was a tear, a souvenir of the fight with his opponent. He'd need to fix that. It was starting to get a little rank, too, but cleaning it was complicated and time-consuming. It had to wait. Fortunately, the outer layers were scent-proof, which meant that, for now, he'd be the only one who would have to live with the funk. When he took it off, however, the sweat seemed to rise from his body in undulating ways. He thought, am gross. Even if Peter had examined himself closely in the mirror, he wouldn't have seen the tiny patch, no bigger than a thumbnail, stuck to his lower back. From the moment his attacker had torn through his suit and attached it to his skin, he had begun to blend in, matching itself to its surroundings in color and texture. It didn't come off in the shower either. It had its limitations, though. It would dry up and peel off in a few days. In the meantime, it would transmit its data. Okay. It was 11:37, and Peter still hadn't made contact with MJ. He knew it was foolish to worry, but he worried anyhow. That was part of the package, and MJ knew it. Peter had lost his parents when he was very young, and that impressed upon him the fragility of the world. He's lost his Uncle Ben because of his own foolish choices. That only made the feelings more intense. He did everything he could to keep his identity a secret. No matter what, he had to keep MJ, Aunt May, and all of his friends out of the crosshairs. The possibilities haunted him every day, though. No matter how careful he was, someone might learn who he was and use the people he cared about as leverage, or worse. So of course he worried. More than that, he wanted to talk to the only person who knew his secret, telling her about the things that had happened that night. MJ rented an apartment near Washington Square Park, and he had the key. He let himself in, but only to make sure that the legendary night owl hadn't surprised him by going to sleep early. No luck there, though, so he considered his options. He might call their mutual friend Harry Osborn. The three of them had been a team for years, and sometimes MJ told Harry things she didn't tell Peter. She said it was because Peter tended to worry. Objectively, he understood. Yet it bothered him, mostly because he was a worrier. This, he knew, was a vicious cycle. Besides, if MJ was going to confide in anyone else, Peter wanted it to be Harry. He was smart, insightful, and an all-around good person. He also had a lot more free time than Peter, unlike some people who, say, labored all day in a lab and then swung around the city half the night as Spider-Man. Harry had the advantage of a rich father. It was an advantage Peter knew that Harry would have traded away in an instant. I want to thank the other person for staying on the stream. Thank you. Harry had long registered working for Oscorp, his father's company. He'd briefly been wanting to work on a pet project for his mother, but that hadn't satisfied Norman Osborn. Then again, he was never satisfied. Now Osborn was mayor of New York City, and that might have been a blessing. Running the city meant Norman didn't have as much time to harangue his son. Pressing Harry to do something with his life, he'd become a part-time thorn in his son's side. So growing up rich had to come with its own burdens, though Peter might have been willing to bear burdens like that. Still, he thought he understood. He'd always been hungry to achieve great things, to make his own way in the world. Often it felt like thrashing around a storm-tossed sea, struggling just to survive. Yet, how did you motivate yourself when no matter what happened, you knew you were going to be okay? Again, problems Peter wouldn't mind sampling, but he knew Harry's struggles were real. His friend had scheduled an upcoming trip to Europe, and he had hoped some time away would help him out. Harry wanted to travel, to see the world, to consider his options, he said. He'd be touring some of the European Oscorp facilities, but that was to placate his father. Excuse me. What Harry really wanted was some distance from his father and to get his head together. Chapter 5 is long. So let's take a break right there. There's nobody else on the stream right now, so yeah. Let's see what's going on in this stream here. I'm going to shoot my cousin a text message to see if he wants to join. Okay, well, due to nobody else being here, I'm going to go ahead and leave the stream. Alright, this is awkward. Maybe I won't do a book reading stream anymore. Let me see this. Be streaming online though. Oh, my Twitch is not linking up. Alright, so I'm just gonna cut the stream here. So those of you guys who watch post stream, thanks for watching.